Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another of my takes on China, and I do apologize in advance for background noise. We've got some noisy neighbors and some work going on nearby. I got a great question in my comments on YouTube, but I can't find it now to give credit to the person who asked it. So if you're watching and you asked this question, I apologize. But I thank you at the same time for a good question. And that was, what's the difference between the NPC and the CPPCC? And there's a very simple answer. One is a group and the other is a meeting. But I'm going to go a lot deeper here and explain kind of how they work in as simple terms as I can. To start with, the NPC, or the National People's Congress, to give it its full name, is the highest organ of state power, which debates and passes legislation in China. The Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the CPPCC, is a political consultation body which supervises the government, consults on issues, and submits those issues to the NPC for votes, which become legislation. And this is the reason why the NPC is known as the rubber stamp parliament, because they approve what the people put before it, and their reason for approving is obvious. It's because they know it's been debated, it's been discussed, strategies have been trialed in local regions and refined before being put to the NPC for a national vote. If they don't work, or if they aren't popular with the people, they'll never be submitted for laws to be passed. It's as simple as that. How does a person get onto either of these bodies is the next logical question. In the case of the NPC, they must be elected from one of 35 different places. And these are the 21 mainland provinces of China and 2 island provinces, one of which is Hainan and the other is Taiwan. Yes, Taiwan is represented on the National People's Congress because it's an undisputed part of China. The 4 municipalities of Beijing, Shanghai, Tianjin, and Chongqing are represented, as are the 5 autonomous regions. And these are like provinces, but have leadership selected from the minority that is in the majority of the region. Unsurprisingly, most people in the West don't know about this. Xinjiang is one of them, and Uyghurs are represented in the National People's Congress, as are Tibetans, Inner Mongolians, the Hui Muslims of Ningxia, and the Zhuang people of Guangxi. It kind of makes a mockery of the rhetoric that we read in Western media when we learn that the people supposedly oppressed are being elected to represent themselves. The 2 SARs, Hong Kong and Macau, and the People's Liberation Army make up the other parts of the 35 NPC voting places. The CPPCC delegates are selected and approved, but not elected. There is a link attached to how that works. It's all described in there. But I'm going to go into a personal experience here that I had to describe the reality of how one gets selected to represent their peers. People who start on the ladder do not need to be members of the CPC. They can be, but they could be members of any of the other 8 parties. Or they could be completely independent, but they need to have done something that has attracted attention. An example, a few months ago I met a lady who about 20 years ago came to Zhongshan, where I live, from Gansu in the far northwest of China. She was unqualified, she'd left school looking for work, she had a friend working in Zhongshan who said, "Come down here, I can help you find some work." So she got a job as a security guard on the gate of a clothes factory. In her free time, she learned how to use the machines. Eventually, she was promoted to be a machine operator. And then, in her free time again, she worked with the quality controllers, and she learned how to do that job too. She was eventually promoted to that department, and she went on through the rest of the factory. I'm sure you can get the picture of what sort of a person she is. She's intelligent, obviously, hardworking, and enthusiastic. So much so that she's now the general manager of the factory. Along the way, she married and had a baby. The baby is now in his 20s and is in university. I haven't met him, but I did learn the story of his education. When her child was very young, She was faced with the dilemma that all migrant workers faced in China. A choice of sending him back to Gansu to live with grandparents, paying for his education, which is very expensive, or leaving her well-paid job and going back to her hometown to be a non-working mother while he went to school. Of all the things I think are wrong about the systems in China, this is perhaps one of the worst aspects. There was no opportunity for her to put the child into a local school because his household registration was in Gansu. She lobbied the school, she lobbied the government, she offered her services as a volunteer in the community and in the local school. Eventually, her child was accepted there because she had proven herself to be a valuable member of the community. Another myth about China is this social credit score. And this is an example which has been taken out of context. If you do something beneficial for the community will reward you. But if you decide you don't want to, there's no punishment, there's no downside, there's only an upside. If you are a valuable member of the community, you can get benefits and the community gets great members. So colleagues in her factory asked, "How did you do this?" And she wrote down the steps explaining which departments needed to give permissions for what services. The local government heard about it, they picked it up, and they published a booklet. The processes became part of the legal system in China. And now, any migrant worker anywhere in the country has the chance to do what she did. It's not easy. They have to follow certain steps, but parents can, if they want to, get their kids educated locally to where they're working now. She was invited to serve on the People's Political Consultative Conference at the provincial level in Guangzhou and is now a delegate to Beijing. I met her and she was about to start her second term in Beijing, but she does all of this on a voluntary basis. She gets no financial reward, but now immigrant workers all over China can contact her and ask her for advice. Do something to help make policy changes, and new laws can come from her suggestions. And that's what China means by whole process democracy. Everyone is involved in changes to the law, and ultimately, everyone can benefit from it. And this is about as far from a dictatorship as it's possible to get. Now, some people think that the CPC only does these kinds of things because it's afraid of being overthrown. I wouldn't say the CPC is afraid of being overthrown. Quite the opposite. The CPC does everything it can to meet the needs of the people, so there's no danger of that happening. The reason the CPC are so keen to help the people is because they are a party of and from the people. Now, if that sounds like propaganda to you, it's probably because you've been conditioned to believe that anything positive that the Communist Party of China does is only for propaganda purposes. If you believe that, you probably haven't been to China and seen the schools, the hospitals, the roads, the bridges, and the other infrastructure they've put in place. You haven't understood how people are selected and elected to supervise and advise the government. And you probably think that a rubber stamp parliament is incapable of making decisions that benefit and grow a country from an impoverishment to the richest in the world over one single generation. You probably never read an official release from the State Council Information Office, which puts out several press releases every day. Propaganda is only bad if it's a lie. I challenge anyone to find a lie in the information. They can see it in Chinese media or in the information provided by the State Council. And if you think it's still propaganda, you've almost certainly never spoken to a Chinese person in China and asked them what they think. In fact, you shouldn't just believe me or the CPC's propaganda. You should ask the people who live here what they think. You might get a surprise. The propaganda, it turns out, is true. Thanks once again for your time and your ongoing support for my channel, and I will see you next time.